Fox continues to deal with the fallout from the release of private text messages in connection with Dominion voting. And the reaction to a new January 6th video given to Fox News host Tucker Carlson, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre spoke about the footage from the insurrection yesterday.
We agree with Fox Nation's own attorneys and executives who have repeatedly stressed in multiple courts of law that Tucker Carlson is not credible when it comes to this issue in particular.
I want to bring in Syracuse University professor Roy Gutterman, who specializes in media law, to talk more about the suit against Fox. He's also the director of the Syracuse Newhouse School Tully Center for Free Speech. Professor, thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
So, after some of the revelations in this lawsuit, the question, of course, is Fox guilty of not being truthful with its audience, the very thing that it often accuses other media outlets of doing? And more importantly, Fox has tried to argue that Dominion's lawsuit goes against the First Amendment. Dominion says Fox is knowingly lying to the audience. They know that these are that, for example, President Trump did not win the 2020 election. And that's seen in text messages and in emails and in Zoom calls that have been reviewed by reporters. But yet they go on the air and they tell their viewers that it was stolen. So how do you reconcile First Amendment versus what Dominion is saying?
When we look at a defamation case, especially involving public matters or public officials or public entities, the knowledge of what the false statement may or may not have been is a critical point. So ever since this case reared its head, the most critical question we've been looking for is what they knew before they put the statements on the air. Mm-hmm. And through discovery, we're learning that they knew a lot about the statements and the credibility of their sourcing. And that all channels into the big question of whether the network put things on the air, put speakers on the air, knowing they were propagating false information. That is the textbook definition of what we call actual malice. And this looks like it's getting as close to an actual malice case as we've seen in recent years, that have gone that's gone this far into the litigation system.
Yeah, because that's sort of the crux of the argument. You know, it's one thing to say something on air that you believe to be true, but that is not true. It's another thing to knowingly say something that isn't true, which brings me to CEO Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy. You know, he said all kinds of things on air on Fox, but other stations too. And sometimes when he's spoken on other cable channels, they stop him. But they didn't do that necessarily when it came to Fox. And in his deposition, Rupert Murdoch appears to kind of acknowledge that, you know, Lindell provides a lot of advertising dollars. They advertises on Fox News, and that might have been a factor when it comes to why Fox didn't maybe push back on some of the things he said. My question to you is, what are the responsibilities of those on air when they have a guest on who may or may not be saying exactly what he believes to be true, even though it is not true?
Belief and facts are two different things. And if there's one thing we've seen through the development, what's been pouring out from discovery, is that some of the sources they put on the air may have believed or may have had more nefarious intentions with what they were saying, but there was doubt in the newsroom. Some of the on-air talent openly or privately questioned some of the materials and some of the sourcing they were putting on the air, and that raises some serious questions. I don't know any responsible journalist who would quote somebody knowing they're saying false things. And granted, we're dealing with the heat of the moment, breaking news, live interviews, live statements, and there's going to be a certain degree of wiggle room we have to let some falsity slip through. But days after the persistence, the continued questions that were coming out certainly raises questions about what the motive was to put potentially false information out on the air.
So Professor, there's always been this notion, if you will, that there is the opinion side of Fox and then there's the journalism side of Fox. That there are some serious journalists at Fox and there's the opinion.
And their hosts.
But there's two things, right? One, generally, I don't mean this, I am generalizing a bit, but for the most part, people struggle to delineate between an opinion show and one that is attempting to deliver the news. That's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is that what we have seen through the discovery and these documents that have been released through this lawsuit, is that even those supposed hard news journalists, anchors, are in many ways beholden to either the viewers or to the ratings or to the anger that has been directed at them. For example, trying to do journalism, like, for example, calling the state of Arizona in President Biden's win column when, in fact, the current president did win Arizona. You saw some of those supposedly hard news journalists saying we should put the Arizona win back in former President Trump's column. So would this all go away? I guess my question is, if you called it Fox Chit Chat instead of Fox News, because the news is, I think, what this is all about, right? It's not news, it's propaganda, and in many cases it's false. But if you say that it's not news, it's just a chit chat channel, then no harm, no foul. Am I getting that wrong or right?
Well, we've seen such a merger of opinion being delivered as news over the years, especially with cable news, that it's hard sometimes to distinguish between what's opinion and what's being put out there as news. It is tough to fill 24 hours with news, and reporting is expensive. And this opinionocracy, or this body of opinion people, really drives viewership, and in some ways it reinforces some thoughts and some values. But you can't bury a false factual statement by simply tacking on, well, I think or I believe. There's a famous Supreme Court case from the early 90s that spoke to that. And we see in Fox's papers, they're channeling their defense toward opinion and covering people's opinions. And that's not always the clearest thing to win on.
So there's a long road. Like, I don't know, people should understand that we're sort of reading these depositions and stuff like that, but this is the process. This is the part where the judge will determine whether or not the lawsuit can go forward,
because Fox
right?
is saying that they're releasing this stuff piecemeal and it's not providing context, that they're just using it to generate headlines.
So if the judge determines that, yes, the lawsuit can go forward, what I want to ask you, Professor, is about the possible consequences. The fines, sure, or a settlement maybe, but what about fines? What about, I don't know, something to do with Fox's license? I mean, if it's really sort of determined that they maliciously spread false information that was damaging, not only to this country, but, not only to this company, but perhaps to the country as well.
Well, first off, I don't think there's going to be any marring of a license or any sort of fining of a license. This is all over cable, not traditional broadcast. So I don't see any regulatory role popping up with this. But in the long run, it's very difficult to assess the impact of a single case. But a case like this, it doesn't seem like there are going to be any winners. If Fox wins, perhaps it is a victory for the First Amendment and reiterates some of our important standards with actual malice and news gathering and dissemination of information. But it is also in some way sanctioning a false narrative to the election, which could reinforce its viewpoints with its viewers. If Dominion wins, then all of us in the media, sort of might take a hit because, there's a conventional thought that when one media entity gets sued, it's just a chipping away of First Amendment values. So, in the long run, it's really hard to see who wins this, if anyone. And, we'll see where it goes.
We will see where it goes. Roy Gutterman, thank you so much.
Thank you.